All right, this is your training video on how to maintain a copper and oxygen swimming pool that is run off of an EcoSmarte programmable device. So our first step in our process today is we're going to collect a water sample. This pool has been left alone for about a week. This is our weekly maintenance, so we're going to test the water to see how it looks today. Don't forget the rule of testing a water is you want to be 18 inches down below the surface, which is about roughly bicep depth. And you want to be away from skimmers or return jets. So we've got our water sample, and we're going to use this in a later step to see what our chemistries are at. All right, our next step in preventive maintenance for a pool is we're going to check the timer on the EcoSmarte versus the timer on our pool controller. So we're going to zoom in on that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to compare that this time right here is 2:55, and the time over here is going through its cycles, and it is 2:55. So we are aligned. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to check to make sure that our pool timers are the same. So this is running from 8 to 7. You see it at the pool, so that's a timer, 8 to 7. And when we go to the menu over here, and we go to timers, we can see that the filter runs from 8 to 7. So those match. The last thing we're going to check is to see when this ionization happens. This is when copper goes in the pool. We want to make sure it's the same time, and over here it's set for Friday. We do our pool maintenance on Saturday, so that's exactly what we want to see, is we want to see the ionization happen the day before we do pool maintenance. So this step is successful. Okay, the next step in the process is we're going to swap out the filter basket. I happen to have an extra one here, so we're going to swap them. If there's not an extra one, you're just going to remove it and clean it. The first thing we do is we put the pool in a service mode so that the pump is for sure off. Then we're going to go around to the side, and we're going to swap the basket. Okay, here we are at the filter. We're going to swap this out. I like to work rather quickly here so that the water doesn't drain out of the tank. Okay, next part of the process is we're going to check the CO2 tanks. We are using CO2 in this system to maintain pH. So we're going to see if this tank is working. So we have a scale down below, and we're going to see what the weight is of that. We'll zoom in on that in a moment. This is a 25-pound tare weight tank that holds 20 pounds of CO2. The total should be 45 pounds. Anything between 45 and 25 means that there's still liquid CO2 in the tank. If there isn't, we need to swap it. We have a wrench pre-positioned to remove this solenoid, this servo, and then we have our backup tank right here that's full and ready to go. If you are a pool service provider and you are bringing these tanks with you, then maybe there's not a second one and you have one in your truck. That's fine. The idea is that when this is empty, we immediately swap it. So this is our weights of the tank. We like to use a dial scale. And in the dial scale, you'll be able to zoom in on that a lot easier instead of a digital scale being outdoors. So we're just going to kind of jiggle the tank. It's a new tank. It's sitting at 45 pounds. Okay, we've replaced the filter basket. We have checked the CO2. We're going to put this out of service mode back into pump mode. We're going to hear the pump running. And then we're going to make some adjustments if necessary. So for example, if we needed to put more CO2 in, we would adjust it on here. We'll cover that a little bit later in the steps, but we're gonna know whether to do that or not after we take our measurements. All right, next step in the process, we're gonna take out the skimmer baskets and the robot for cleaning. All right, we're done cleaning them. Time to put everything back in. The actual filter pump basket is going to go back into the chemical cabinet for use next week. That's it for that step. All right, next step in the process, we take our water sample and we're going to find out what our chemistries are. We have a copper test kit with a color match for that. We're going to do a pH, and we're going to test for hardness. Hardness tells you to swirl it in the water. This is why I try to fill this thing up. So I can just swirl it right here. So I'm going to grab one of these strips, and following the directions on here, we're just going to swirl it. Shake it off. And then we're going to do a color compare. And it says to wait for 30 seconds to do a color compare. In this case, it looks like we're coming in, looks like we're kind of low on hardness. We need to be above 300. We need to be up here toward red. So we need to add some calcium chloride to raise the hardness. So that's one sample. The next one is we're going to do the pH. Five drops of that according to the instructions. Compare that. Looks like we're sitting right at 6.8, which is fantastic for a copper pool. We want to be between these bottom two numbers, 6.8 and 7.2. All right, so I put a white card behind just so we can see the color. It's yellow, so it's down probably beyond 6.8. It's probably at 6.7, which means that we need to lessen up a little bit on the acid. But as long as it's between 7.2, 6.8, we're in good shape. One of the great things about CO2 is that even if you overdose your pool, the lowest it's going to go is 6.7, which is just fine for a copper pool. So good test results there. And the last one we're going to do is copper. Now copper, when we test this copper one, it requires 3 minutes of sitting in that solution. So we're going to step away for a moment and pick the video back up after I get this thing started. But according to the instructions for this, 5 drops of each one. Here's A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cap it, invert it. Again, we're just following the instructions on the kit. This is a Lamont test kit for copper. Then we're going to go to B. 5 drops. Again, we're going to invert that. Mix that up. Then we're going to set our timer for 3 minutes. And when we come back, we'll be able to measure this using our color-coded card. We essentially will hold this on the white placard, and we will look down that tube of water solution and get close to whatever copper we need to manage. So it looks like it's already turning a little blue, so we'll see what kind of copper we get. All right, so it's been 3 minutes. We'll stop our timer. We're going to use our test kit, and what we want to do is we want to look down below here and see where we're at. Copper appears to be a bit low at 0.1, 0.15 roughly. So we obviously need to be adding more copper. As a reminder, the access code to get into the EcoSmarte is always up, down, up. All right, the next step in our process is we're going to make adjustments based on the chemistries we measured. So the first thing is pH. We just measured pH was slightly low. So what we're going to do in this scenario is subtract some time from the CO2 accessory. If pH was too high, we would add anywhere from 8 to 16 minutes. Or if we're too low, we would subtract 4 to 8 minutes. We're in subtraction. So we're going to hit accessory. The CO2 feed is the first thing up, right arrow to that. It's set for time next. And we said we're going to take off 4 to 8 minutes. Let's just take off 4 minutes. And then we're going to hit next. It's back there. And if we want to get out of this screen, we literally just hit 4. Okay, if pH is too low, and you can adjust obviously the CO2 and be pumping more CO2 in there. The other thing you may do just to get that CO2 helped a little further along is you may want to add muriatic acid. I've got two different bottles here. The one on my furthest right here I got from a hardware store. This one from a pool supply store. They're both about 31.45% hydrochloric acid. Remember, when we put this in the pool, we're going to want to dilute this in a 5-gallon bucket of water. So I usually will add 4 gallons into a bucket of water. I will dilute this into that, and then I'll pour that in the pool. If I'm just trying to aid the CO2, I'm not going to put more than half a gallon in this. That's the most I would want to put. Sometimes if the pool's small, you may only put a quart into it. But don't be afraid to add muriatic acid, because the copper needs to operate between 6.8 and 7.2. And we've just made an adjustment to the CO2. It's going to take a little while for that to kick in over the next couple of days. We may want to do this while we're here on our weekly maintenance step. The next thing is if copper is outside of range. If it's too high, we want to reduce it by 1 to 2 hours here. Take it off the back end to the front end. If it's too low, we want to add 1 to 2 hours. Now in our case, it's too low, and we already are running 11 hours here, so we would want to go and do another day. We would want to add copper another day for about 1 to 2 hours. So what we're going to do in that scenario is we're going to go back into the ion. So we're going to first hit oxy, and we're going to hit next, and then the icon went away, so we're going to hit next again. Sunday is off, Monday is off, Tuesday is off, Wednesday is off, but Thursday is where we're going to add. So we're going to turn this on, but then we're going to right arrow, and we're going to really only add for an hour, and we're going to add for an hour at the back end here, or maybe we'll do 2 hours just to be safe. So we're going to add to the back end. So we're going to go from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we're going to add to this all the way up to 5 p.m. and then we're going to hit next. Friday goes back to off because of default, so we're going to go back to on, and then we're going to go next. Saturday is off, and now we're back. Now it's showing us Thursday 5 to 7. On Friday, it's going to show us Friday here for the full time. So we've added that. The last thing is hardness. We said hardness was too low, so we were going to add calcium chloride. All right, step 10, add calcium chloride if the hardness is too low. So I have a bucket of calcium chloride, and it's a 20-pound bucket, and it gives you the instructions on here for how much to use per 10,000 gallons. So we're going to cast that into the pool. We'll measure that out. Now this typical scoop is usually about a pound of material. So if it says to add 4 pounds or whatever, we'll just add.
And here are the details on the back of the calcium chloride container telling you that for 100 parts per million, for a 15,000 gallon pool like we have here, we would want to add 15 pounds.
All right, on our next step then, now we're going to start adding some chemicals. We've already made other adjustments to other chemicals, but we're going to start adding some other preventive measures. The next one on the list is a phosphate remover, and this is the recommended brand, C-Clear, commercial grade phosphate remover. And based on the size of the pool, it tells you to add 1 to 2 ounces per 5,000 gallons. We have a 15,000 gallon pool. I use a half a cup, which is right at about 4 ounces, and that's what we use to prevent algae in the pool. We remove what they feed on, phosphates. All right, half a cup of anti-phosphate or phosphate remover. Okay, as an alternative to this next step, after you put the phosphate remover in, you can choose to put some type of algicide in there as just a preventive measure if you're very conscientious about that, or maybe you have a lot of organics and leaves and trees stuff hanging over your pool, and so you might have a history of some algae issues with your pool. Nothing wrong with putting in a preventive treatment. This is algicide 60. Based on the instructions on here, it says anywhere from 2 to 4 ounces per 10,000 gallons. Again, we've got a 15,000 gallon pool. That would equate to 3 to 6 ounces. We're just going to put in 4 ounces again using our same half cup measuring. All right, a half cup of aldehyde 60. All right, last step of our trip to the pool for the weekly maintenance is we're going to brush the walls. Now, if you have a robot that crawls along the walls, great. That should get most of your concerns cleaned up. However, if you have wet decks or swim out benches or steps, that robot is not likely to get to them, so you're going to want to have to brush those. And there's several different brushes I have with me. I've got an aluminum one that's good for getting into little crevices and corners. I have this one for doing the corners really well down where the steps slope into from a tread to a riser. And the last one I have is your basic brush for brushing the main part of the pool. So that is your final step before you call pool maintenance done this week.